Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our Big Book 12-step telephone workshop. My name is Herb and I'm an alcoholic. Please join me in the attitude of open mind, open heart, praying the set-aside prayer. God, please set aside everything that I think I know about myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and you, for an open mind and new experience of myself, my brokenness, my spiritual path, and especially you. Please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Well, we're still in an orientation. You've got a couple assignments, reading and highlighting and reflecting on and doing some writing with regard to the Roman numerals of the Big Book, up to, but not including, the doctor's opinion. And I'm working backwards in terms of the steps, looking at step 12, then 11, then 10, as a completely new way of approaching these workshops, brand new this year. We're looking at step 12 because it tells us the mission. It's not about addiction. It's about establishing a relationship with power. Bill calls it a spiritual awakening, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. Then we looked at step 11, unpacking the Big Book's description of meditation in pages 85 to 88, so that we have a tool to approach. Step 1, powerlessness, using a resource of power. And now we're going to look at step 10. Bill says in step 10, we've entered the world of the spirit. He's assuming that we're in and completing step 9, pages 84 and 85 in the Big Book. We've entered the world of the spirit, meaning we've come out of the world of self. And we're living our way of life, which he says we commence as we clean up the past, as we do step 9, we do step 10, we do step 11, we do step 12. Well, we're taking a look at these 3 steps that Bill includes in, quote, our way of life, 10, 11, and 12, as a resource to actually approach and apply steps 1 through 9 to our personal lives. Bill says in the 12 and 12 that inventory and meditation go hand in glove. Inventory, keeping the channel clear so that we can fill the channel with life, with light, with grace, with God. Inventory, step 10, it says we're repeating, continue to take personal inventory. Step 10 actually is a recap of and a reworking of steps 1 through 9. Steps 1 through 9 are the program of recovery. Bill tells us in step 10 that we're placed in a position of neutrality. In fact, in the title page and in many other places, he said we have recovered from our addiction, first half of the first step. But he also says in that step 10 material that we're not cured. We have a daily reprieve, contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition, and the way we maintain our spiritual condition is to continue to do on a daily basis. Steps 10, 11, and 12. So in step 4 in the 12 and 12 inventory, Bill talks about instincts gone awry. And that's the basis of the step 4 inventory in the big book, instincts gone awry. The survival instincts that we have are fight, flight, and freeze. Survival instincts, biological, physiological, at the basic level of our survival as entities, not even as animals, but as entities. Survival instincts to fight, survival instincts to run or flight, survival instincts to freeze, hide, camouflage. They translate in emotional behavior to anger, fight, fear, flight, dishonesty, freeze, camouflage, hiding. It's an amazing parallel. He was intuitively, wonderfully understanding human nature and our human structure. In the 12 and 12, he says, in step 10, it's a spiritual axiom. Whenever we are disturbed, there's something wrong with us. Now, I hate that. When I first saw that, it didn't make any sense to me. No, it's circumstances, it's people. That's what's disturbing me. But when I did a 4th step out of the big book, I got very clear. I do not have a part in my resentments. You hear that? What is your part in your resentments? No, I got real clear. I do not have a part in my resentments. I have the whole thing, 100%. Whose anger is it? Oh, it's mine. It's connected to external circumstances and people, but they're just doing what they do. Life is just evolving as life evolves. It's not personal. It's my reaction to people and circumstances that is my problem. That's a spiritual awakening. It won't become as clear to you by hearing it as it will when you do step 4. Then it becomes technicolor in its application. Bill says in step 10 that we continue to watch for, page 84. We continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. See, these are the 4 components of the step 4 inventory. In fact, on page 62, he says selfishness, self-centeredness is the root of the problem. And the fruit of the root, and you'll see that in the Way of Life document in a schema where selfishness, self-centeredness is the foundation, and out of it spring resentment and fear and dishonesty and sex and secrets and guilt and shame. Some of the words are in the big book, some of them are not. We'll treat that when we get to step 4. The point here is the metaphor. The root of the problem in me is self-centeredness. And we'll see that when we do unmanageability, the second half of the 1st step. Has nothing to do with our addiction. That's why there's a dash. Admitted we were powerless over alcohol, admitted we were powerless over our addiction, dash, that our life had become unmanageable. It's a dash, it's not an and. Unmanageability, the best kept secret in the rooms of the 12-step culture, unfortunately, probably the biggest source of relapse is the lack of understanding of what does unmanageability mean, and then why does Bill say in step 10 we're not cured? And we have a daily reprieve. I looked up the word in a dictionary, reprieve, stay of execution. The guillotine of our addiction hangs over us 24/7. We are not ever going to be made normal physically or mentally. We have a stay of execution. we have a spiritual shield which we've built through steps 1 through 9 by achieving some sense of a effective relationship with power. Think Star Wars. The mothership has a shield around it that makes it invulnerable to attack. But if the shield has a flaw, or if the shield is not intact, then it's vulnerable to being attacked. 10, 11, and 12 are our spiritual shield. And as long as we're doing that on a daily basis, our spiritual shield is intact. And if we don't, there will be a flaw that will develop in the shield. And over time, it makes us vulnerable to the obsession. And once the obsession takes hold of us, we're lost, we're hijacked. And we're back in relapse, and the darkness descends and the light disappears. Like the dimmer switch. I love that image. We'll use it constantly throughout our time together for the next year. The dimmer switch goes up a notch at a time. It also goes down a notch at a time, and it's on a greased axle, and it's wired to go backwards. It's on a trip trigger. It's hardwired to go backwards. Dr. Tebow was helping Bill Wilson. He's a psychiatrist with the structure of AA early on, and also with his own personal therapy. And he said, Bill got it right. The first 9 steps are for the deflation of the ego at death. The first 9 steps will deflate the ego, the false self, that Hollywood storefront that we've constructed from survival needs, and we don't know that we don't know. And we have a mask that we wear that is our persona, our personality, and we don't know that that's our personality, our persona. It's a mask, and that it does not represent us because it has become us. And since we look through that mask at society and reality and interact with them from that persona, we suffer because it's not real. It's false. It's a belief system that's a lie. And we're living our story, not living our life, and we don't know that. We just know that we're suffering because of circumstances and people. That's how we become victims. And most everybody lives their life as a victim. Freud said the task of the human being is to make the unconscious conscious so that we realize we're not victims of circumstances and people. We're not victims of fate. That in fact, we're victims of our own ignorance and our own unhealthy behavior. Today, each one of us sitting here right now, watching, listening to this workshop, each one of us has exactly the life that you have created, that I have created, that we have created. We have exactly the life that we've earned. Now, have there been outside influences? Absolutely. Have there been influences that have been very unhealthy and, in fact, deformative? Absolutely. But if you're 18 or 21, pick your age of adulthood responsibility. Now, I'm responsible for the cards that I've been dealt. Some of it was mischief, some of it was malevolent, some of it was absolutely criminal. Yeah, it's tragic, but it is what it is. And now I need to deal with the cards I've been dealt. And to the extent that I accept responsibility, I can heal. Will I ever be normal? Will I ever be what I could have been, should have been? No. But I will be, given my circumstances, the best me I can be if I take the course of healing and personal responsibility. That's what step 10 is. In fact, on 84, Bill has finished giving us the promises of the 9th step. And he says they will always materialize if we work for them. Notice these promises are an evolutionary process. They will materialize if we work for them. And that work isn't a one-time effort. It's a daily commitment. I like the image of leaning gently against the dimmer switch. Look at the screen now. Leaning gently against the dimmer switch. There's no violence here. Leaning gently into the Spirit, and the Spirit will wrap its arms around us and lead us forward. And we will be in the flow of the Spirit. And our life will flourish eventually. It's a very slow process, this dimmer switch. It's not like a light switch. It's not an event. It's not a task. It's a process and an experience. They will always materialize if we work for them. We continue to take personal inventory. I'm on page 84. We continue to set any new mistakes as we go along. We vigorously commenced this way of living as we cleaned up the past, this way of living 10, 11, and 12. Vigorously, as my people begin to do step 9, at the beginning of step 9, they get the instructions on 10, 11, and 12 so that they can incorporate those tools into their daily life. We have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness, to know better and to do better. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. We will never be normal. It says this on page 30. The delusion that we are like other people or ever will be has to be smashed. We'll see that when we get into step 1. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonest, resentment, and fear. Notice what he says next. When they crop up, not if. You see, we never transcend our humanity. We are material beings. As so, we have an innate corruptness that goes along with materiality. Our minds don't work correctly, our bodies don't work correctly, and what we will find in unmanageability is our will does not work correctly. The spiritual malady is self-centeredness. My will, on its own power, will always choose myself. On its own power. When these crop up, number 1, we ask God at once to remove them. So that's the assumption. So we pray, of course. That's a code in the big book. Whenever it suggests that we talk to God, it's a code. When they crop up, meaning when I'm disturbed, there's something wrong with me, I take the responsibility. I ask God at once to remove them. I pray for healing. Number 2, we discuss them with someone immediately, meaning we talk to somebody. I pray because I'm powerless, but I hold myself accountable to a sponsor or an accountability partner or somebody. I talk to somebody. To name it is to tame it. When we verbalize what's going on inside of us, it takes the power out of it. It's almost magical. That's what therapy's about. That's what confession's about. That's what step 4 is all about. That's what friendship is all about. We make amends quickly if we have harmed anyone. If I'm disturbed, I'm usually going to be disturbing you. Not all the time. Then we resolutely turn our thoughts to someone we can help. That's the 4th piece of the formula. Pray, number 1. Number 2, talk to somebody. Number 3, clean it up, make an amend. Number 4, turn your thoughts to helping somebody else. Notice the words. He doesn't say that we actually help anybody. He just says, begin thinking about other people. Because if in fact, the implication is, I'm thinking about somebody else, I'm not thinking about me. This is the turning that is committed to in step 3. Made a decision to turn. Turn from what to what? From self to God, from self to power, from self to others. Step 11 and 12. This is the turning, a spiritual coin having two sides. Our relationship with other with a capital O on one side, meditation. Our relationship of contribution to others, small o, on the other side, step 12. An amazing organic structure designed specifically for us as human beings. And you'll see it, and I'll emphasize it. The even steps are naming steps, and the odd steps are decision and action steps. And steps 10, 11, and 12 are a nice recap of that journey on a daily basis. There's lots of misinformation about step 10. Some people talk about doing it in writing. The big book doesn't, neither does the 12 and 12. Some people talk about doing it at night. The big book doesn't, neither does the 12 and 12. In fact, the implication is here on page 84 that we're doing it. He says at once, immediately, resolutely, and quickly. It's kind of like right now. And in fact, that's confirmed in the 12 and 12, where in step 10, Bill calls it a spot check inventory. On the spot, when I'm disturbed, I use this 4-part formula to be in alignment. Here's the life force and here's reality. Here I am with my free will, and when I'm disturbed, I'm going against reality. I'm going against the flow. I'm going against the force. I have free will and I can do that. Step 3 is a commitment to turn and be turned, to be in alignment with reality so that there's a flow, there's a congruence, there's a harmony, there's an equilibrium. Step 10 is the tool of emotional sobriety. Reducing the amount of disturbance and reducing the frequency of disturbance. Love and tolerance of others is our code. It's not done in writing. It's not done at night. Now, I'm not invested in it. I have no rules as I've continued to describe this process. There are only 2 disciplines, Bill said, God and alcohol, God and our addiction. He said, we're either going for one or we're going for the other, the dimmer switch concept. It's either going up toward the light or it's going down toward the darkness. Really simple. And we cease fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. Sanity will have returned. And Bill uses the term in the way it should be used in terms of understanding the etiology of it, coming from the Latin sanus, S-A-N-U-S, which means health. And when you put an I-N in front of it, it means unhealthy. That's all it means. We'll take a look at a story in the big book on pages 35 to 37, Jim, the car salesman that put a little whiskey in his milk. And on the top of page 37, he says, that's just insane. A lack of perspective, a lack of healthy thinking. There's something about us that's deficient in our thinking. We don't learn from the negative consequences of our behavior, and we don't remember to remember. Fred, in the same section, another example of the obsession and delusion that we'll be looking at as the problem of the mind, talks about a strange mental blank spot. I love the phrase. That's because it's where I lived and sometimes continue to. Not concerning my addiction, but concerning my relationship with reality. Bill calls us mental defectives for a good reason. I don't like the term, especially applied to me, but my history tells me it's accurate. I don't learn. I do not connect the dots. easily. More easily now because I have more consciousness. We will seldom be interested in liquor. If tempted, we recoil from it as from a hot flame, in contrast to the story he gave us about the hot flame that we continue to burn ourselves. We're placed in a position of neutrality, he says on page 85. Page 85 continues. It is easy to let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on our laurels. He's referring to past accomplishments, the laurel wreaths that were given in Roman and Greek times as a reward for winning a competition, athletic or artistic. They put a wreath from the laurel tree as a sign to the village that this is a winner. This is a person who approximated the gods in their development. But the wreath was for today's accomplishment. And I can't rely on that tomorrow or next week. We are headed for trouble if we do, for alcoholism is a subtle foe. We are not cured. We have a daily reprieve. Every day is a day we must carry the vision of God's will into all of our activities. Whose vision is that? Read it again. Not God's vision. I can't get behind God's mind, figuratively speaking, and see through God's eyes. No, it's an invitation for us to do meditation, to create our vision of God's will for us. How can I best serve thee? Thy will be done. There's the prayer, the ultimate prayer, to put my will and action in alignment with my understanding of God's will and invitation. These are thoughts which must go with us constantly. We can exercise our willpower along this line all we want. It is the proper use of the will. Thy will be done. Not my will be done. Thy will be done. When I'm disturbed, it's because I'm out of alignment. And I get into alignment when I pray and when I discuss and when I make changes and repair the damage and I resolutely think about somebody else. Step 10. An incredibly effective tool to ensure that the channel stays clear so that grace and God and life and power and light can flow through us. Let's have some conversation now with the group about their experience with this step and with this process. Thank you. Well, thank you very much for your attendance at today's workshop. And please join me in the serenity prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Thank you, everybody.